Oh, let's take a breath and breathe into that. Yes. Our theme for the month is finding God in everything. We just heard God, didn't we? Yeah, finding God in everything. What a revolutionary way of living, finding God in everything. That means that sometimes we have to dig deep. Sometimes we have to look hard. Sometimes we have to really go deep. And then sometimes we have to revisit and circle around again and circle around again and circle around again to find God in everything. And so today we're going to be talking about compassion, the doorway of compassion. A few days ago, I went home and turned on the TV, and there was a woman standing outside an event that she was about to attend, and a reporter walked up to her and started asking her questions about the coronavirus. And as I listened to her response, I immediately became irritated and nearly broke my finger as I was turning off the TV, changing the channel on the remote. And I was sort of surprised a little bit by my reaction, and that was really a reaction, not a response. That was a reaction. And interestingly, the next day, I turned the TV on, I turned to another channel, and the same woman was being interviewed by the same, they were playing a clip of that same interview, and I heard it again. And rather than turning it off, I paid attention to my response, or as I said before, to my reaction. And I became aware of how closed I became about her reaction, about what she was saying, and how I didn't want to hear what she had to say. And as I listened to her this time, I watched her. I just paid attention to her, and I listened to what she had to say. I didn't agree with what she was saying, but I listened to what she had to say. And more importantly, I paid attention to what I was feeling. I paid attention to how I had reacted. I keep saying responded, but I reacted. Reaction is kind of a knee-jerk kind of thing. A response is more considered. So I didn't respond. I reacted the first time I heard her. The second time I heard it, I wasn't any more in agreement with her, but at least I was more open-hearted. And that's when I really started to think about compassion and what that really means. Compassion means there are elements of compassion. That means being understanding or accepting or relating to the other person, or relating to something or someone, or listening, or being open, or keeping our hearts open. That's what compassion is all about. It doesn't, oftentimes we think of compassion as sympathy or pity, and it can be that also. But in this way, I'm talking about compassion, the open-heartedness with which we approach life, the open-heartedness with which we approach each other, the open-heartedness with which we walk through this world. And in so many little ways that we don't even think about, our hearts close automatically when we see someone who's different, when we see someone who thinks differently, when we hear someone who's saying something that we don't really believe, when we see someone acting in a way that we don't think that they should be acting. We get into all kinds of issues. We get into all kinds of mindsets. Namely, we get into judgment. We get into judgment because that's exactly where I went when I saw her and started to hear what she had to say about how she felt about it. It was judgment. And last week I was talking about I was talking about not being in fear, but coming from a place of love rather than from a place of fear. Today I'm talking about coming from a place of compassion rather than a place of judgment. And so often we judge each other, so often, and that's what keeps us in that place of separation. Because the only thing that ever needs to be healed is our sense of separation from God. And when we feel separate from God, we feel separate from each other. And when we feel separate from each other, we start acting separate from each other. And then we start that whole them and us routine that we go through over and over and over again. But we get caught up in it so quickly. We get caught up in it in ways that we don't even know. I got caught up in that illusion of separation simply by watching someone on TV who had her opinion about how she felt about the coronavirus. I have my opinion, but she wasn't entitled to hers because it wasn't the same as mine. Hers was not the right one. Mine is. Is that separation or what? Is that separation or what? And I had to really start to think about finding God in everything. How do we find God in this situation? How do we find God in situations where we disagree? How do we find God when we see people espousing things that we don't believe? How do we find God when we see people acting in ways that we totally are against? How do we find God there? Well, you know, the first way we find God is by knowing that God is there. That's the first thing, is that knowing that God is in everything. That there's only one life, there's only one power, there's only one presence, there's only one mind. There's only one activity, there's only one breath, there's only one. There's only one, and that one is God. That one is a life of God. And that one expresses in and through and has so many things, everything. Because if God is all there is, then God is all there is. It's, you know, this teaching, our principles are so simple. They seem so simple, yet they are so complex, and they can be so difficult sometimes to put into practice. Yet they seem very, very simple. We find God in everything because we know God is in everything, because we know God is everywhere present. Simple, right? Walking that out, living that out, each and every moment of each and every day and every circumstance in which we find ourselves can be more difficult. Can be much more difficult. Change your thinking, change your life. Is that simple or what? Change your thinking, change your life. If you're having problems, if you're having issues, change your thinking, and you will change your life. The changing your thinking part of it is the part that gets to be complex. It gets to be that part that we have to work at over and over and over again, because we change our thinking by replacing the thoughts we have with a new thought. But do you know how many times a day you have to do that? Do you know how many times a minute you have to do that sometimes? Do you know how many times you have to do that over and over and over again? First of all, it requires us to be mindful. It requires us to be present. It requires us to be in the moment all the time. And paying attention to what we are feeling. Paying attention to, as I did. I didn't feel my heart close, but I felt my finger on that remote. Trying to change that channel really quickly. And again, I wasn't paying attention to it very much that day, but the very next day when I saw the same interview happening, I had to take a deep breath. And I had to really take a look at that. And I had to ask myself, why am I getting this bent out of shape about this? Why am I reacting this way? Why am I closing my heart? Why am I closing my ears? Why do I not want to hear her side? Why do I not want to hear the way she feels about this? If I were being interviewed, I'd want her to hear my side of it. But that's different, because my side is the right side. Don't we go through that? What we really want to do is to develop compassionate hearts. We want to develop compassionate hearts, hearts that are open, hearts that are available. First of all, hearts that are open and available to the power and the presence of God. And when we do that, then it starts that compassion starts to spill over into every aspect, every area of our lives. It starts to spill over to everyone we meet, to everyone with whom we come in contact. It spills over in little ways as well as in the big ways. And we just have to be willing. That's what compassion has. That's one of the elements of compassion anyway, is willingness, the willingness to do something different, the willingness to see other people, the willingness to relate to what they're saying, to relate to them as humans, to respect others. The willingness to do that, the willingness to be open-minded, open-hearted, even when we disagree. And I think that is so important for us to keep in mind, that compassion is the doorway to God. There are many doorways to God, but compassion is certainly one, because compassion, we can't have compassion with a closed heart. It just doesn't work that way. We have to open our hearts to each other. We have to open our hearts to the other. We have to open our hearts to those who are different. We have to open our hearts to those who think differently and act differently. We have to open our hearts, more importantly, to ourselves. Because oftentimes when we get into that place of feeling that we have been less spiritual than we think we are, or that we think we should be, then we start to blame ourselves, and we start to judge ourselves, and we start to go through all that stuff. The same kinds of things that we put on other people, we start putting on ourselves. That same kind of separation activity that we get involved in with others, we get involved in with ourselves. And so we have to have a compassionate heart, not only toward others, but we have to have a compassionate heart toward ourselves. Our compassionate heart cannot be discriminating. It's just a compassionate heart that's open and receptive and available to love. It is open and receptive and available to all of the qualities of God, to joy, to peace, to harmony, to balance, to oneness. Our compassionate hearts keep us in that place of oneness, and it puts us in a place where we can start to really remember who we are, and we can remember whose we are. We can remember whose we all are, that we are all of the same source. But we have to do that by being mindful, by our spiritual practice, by our intention to live in oneness, by our intention to find God in everything, in everything. And we especially need to be doing that now, because there's so much going on in the world. There's so much going on, not only with things out there, but things that are going on in our own individual lives. There's so much going on that creates so much fear and so much division. And as I talked last week, we want to do the things that we need to do, take care of the things that we need to take care of from a place of love, from a place of wisdom, from a place of compassion, and not from a place of fear. Yes, according to the CDC and the health professionals, the coronavirus is infectious. So is fear. So is fear. Fear is highly contagious and highly infectious and highly creative. Because when you are in fear, we're in that place of feeling. And Ernest Holmes tells us that that's where the creation is in the feeling. And when we get in that place of feeling the fear, that's when we start to create. And when we start to act from that place of fear, we act from that creative place to bring into our experience that which we don't want anyway. That which we fear the most has come upon us because we have so much fear about it. We have so much fear about it. And again, the fear spreads, the fear spreads, the fear spreads. What we want to do is to have the love spread. We want to take a step back. We want to take our breath, catch our breath. We want to take a deep breath. And we want to allow ourselves to be open and receptive. Open and receptive to love. Open and receptive to compassion. Open and receptive to different viewpoints. Open and receptive to other people who don't act the same way we do, who don't look the same way we do, who don't talk the same way we do, who don't think the same way we do. Thank goodness. That would be a boring world, to have everybody thinking alike, acting alike, looking alike, doing the same thing. And so what we want to do is to be in a place of open-heartedness, be in a place of oneness. I'm reminded of a poem by Hafiz that the heart is a 1,000-stringed instrument that can only be tuned by love. The heart is a 1,000-stringed instrument that can only be tuned by love. The heart is a 1,000-stringed instrument that can only be tuned by love. And do you know, when we get into places of fear, when we get into places of judgment, when we get into places of blame, when we get into places of shame, when we get into those places of regret, all that stuff, our heart's out of tune. Our heart's out of tune. We have to tune it up with love. And we start that with compassion. One of the things we have to recognize also, let's take a breath. One of the things we have to recognize also is that we are all reflections of each other. We're all reflections of each other. Breathe that one in. Ernest Holmes says, what you're looking for, you're looking with. He also says, what you're looking at, you're looking with. So if you're looking at judgment out there and closed-heartedness, you're looking with that also. If you're looking at fear, you're looking with that. Other people are reflections of us, even though we don't like to admit that. When I've been thinking about this woman in the interview ever since I saw her the other day, and more importantly, I've been thinking about my response, my reaction to her, and I've had to ask the question over and over. Whatever it was I saw in her that irritated me, where's that in me? She was so adamant about how she felt, and she had some negative words to say and negative feelings about it, but she was really adamant about it, and that's what irritated me about her. I don't know why y'all laughing. Yeah, been there, done that. When something irritates you, when somebody irritates you, when somebody makes you really upset, when somebody does something that creates a strong feeling in you toward them, the question is, where's that in me? Where's that in me? Where's that hard-heartedness in me? That was the question I had to ask myself. What was it about her that irritated me, so her attitude about it? And then I thought about my attitude about the same thing. Even though my attitude is the right one, it's still a strong attitude. She had a strong attitude too. Why isn't she entitled to have hers? Why isn't she entitled to have her beliefs? And anybody else, why aren't people entitled to have different beliefs than ours? And so when we get caught up in that whole thing of judgment of other people, we have to really stop and look at what is it about ourselves? What is it about ourselves that's being touched? What is it about ourselves that need to change? What is it about ourselves that's being shown to us? What mirror are we looking at? Because we are all mirror images of each other. We are all mirror images in some way of each other. We may not look alike, but energetically, we are mirror images of each other. Because otherwise, we wouldn't be in each other's presence. We wouldn't be interacting with each other. And so what we do when we start to separate, we forget who we are. And we start to think that we are separate, and we start to act separate, and then look at where we are. And what we really want to remember in dealing with everybody is that we are all a part of this, we are all interconnected in this whole. We are all interconnected in this whole universal energy. We are all a part of this universal energy. I'm a part of it, you're a part of it, we can't get out of it. I don't care how hard we try, how much we like to deny it, or whatever the case may be, we're all one in this universal energy. And the more we begin to recognize that and start to treat each other that way, then the more our hearts open and we begin to experience a life that is revolutionary, where we're finding God in everything. It's real simple. We're finding God in everything, every aspect of our lives, every person we meet. And so when you find yourself caught up in judgment, when you find yourself caught up in criticism, when you find yourself caught up in irritation with other people or things that are going on, that's compassion knocking on the door. That's compassion knocking on the door saying, hey, take a breath, open your heart, think this through, walk through this with what you know, practice the principles that we know. That's what we need to do now. Practice the principles that we know, use the tools that we have. We know the first thing we do is go to prayer. Starting to pray for each other, pray for other people. Pray for them not to be like us, but pray for them to recognize that oneness of who they are. using the tools that we have, blessing others, blessing them in their ability to do something different, blessing them in their ability to think a different way, blessing them in their ability to live a different way, blessing them in their ability to see God everywhere, blessing them in their ability to be open-hearted. Those are the tools that we have to pray, to bless. Forgive them. Forgive others. Forgive others for whatever it is that you may be holding against them. Forgiveness is a part of one of the tools that we have. It's a part of that whole compassion thing that we're talking about. Forgiveness, forgiving them for not being willing to see the light. Forgive them for wanting to remain in ignorance. Forgive them and forgive ourselves for judging them for it. So all the tools that we use for others, we have to use those tools for ourselves. We have to use those tools for ourselves. We have to be in a place of acceptance. We have to be in a place of forgiveness. We have to be in a place of being willing to listen to the other person, being willing to listen to ourselves, to that still small voice within each one of us that's always speaking to us, always guiding us, always directing us, always telling us what to do, always telling us how to do. And all we have to do is take a deep breath and be willing to allow it in, to allow it to guide us, to allow it to direct us, to allow it to interact with itself as me and as you. Because as I interact with you, it is God interacting with itself. It is God speaking to it. It is God loving. It is God connecting with itself each and every moment of each and every day. And when we recognize that, then that's how we find God in everything. When we recognize God is all there is. The only thing happening is God. So all interactions are God interacting. God interacting. And God can only interact through us according to the opening that's available to it. God can only interact through us according to interact between us according to the opening within each one of us. And so that's why there are different levels of openness, there's different levels of peace, there are different levels of harmony, there are different levels of all, because God is just being God, just acting like God acts. But he can only act according to how open we are, how receptive we are to it, and how willing we are to allow it to be all that it wants to be in and through and as each one of us. That starts with a compassionate heart. And as I said, everything's a reflection of us. Ernest Holmes says that the gate to the kingdom of God opens both ways. The gate to the kingdom of God swings both ways. What you close out will close you out. What you close out will close you out. So if you're closing the gateway of compassion, if you're closing the doorway of compassion, the door of compassion will be closed to you. That's just the way it works because it swings both ways. Compassion going out, compassion coming in. Love going out, love coming in. Oneness going out, oneness coming in. Joy going out, joy coming in. Peace going out, peace coming in. God going out, God coming in. It all boils down to the same thing. So let's just take a breath as we just allow ourselves to set our intention to allow our hearts to be open, to allow our hearts to be filled with compassion, to have a compassionate heart so that we begin to look at each other and see each other with softer eyes. Not with harsh eyes of judgment, with softer eyes. Where we recognize that we are all one. We're not all the same, but we're all one. We're all one. We're all one. And that only one is expressing in and through and as each one of us according to our very own uniqueness. Let's turn within. As we just continue to breathe in and to breathe out, to recognize that that one is the only power, that one is the only presence, that one is the only life, that one is the only mind, that one is the only activity, that one is the only breath. That one I choose to call God. That one is my very life. That one is the life of each of us here this day. That one lives and moves and has its being in each and every one of us. It lives and moves and has its being in each one of us. We live and move and have our being in that one that we call God. No separation. There can be no separation. One. My life. All life. God. And so it is from this place of awareness that I speak the word for each of us this day, speaking a word of compassion. From a place of compassionate hearts, knowing that one is operating in and through each one of us, and our hearts are open and available to it. And as we do this, we let go of stuff that we hold on to. We let go of otherness, and we move into a place of oneness. We let go of any sense of separation, and we move into the truth of our being, which is oneness. And as we do this, all things are made new. In that one, all things are made new. All things are made new over and over and over again. And so we can release fear, we can release judgment, we can release unforgiveness, we can release shame and blame and all that stuff. And we can stand in the knowing that God is in the midst of everything. And we don't have to search for it. We just open up and allow it to be itself. And as we do this, healing on every level of our being takes place. In every aspect of our being, in every area of our lives, healing is happening right here, right now, by this word that's being spoken. We take a breath and just accept this healing that's happening for each of us. In whatever area of our lives, in our body temples, in our bodies of affairs, in our financial affairs, our relationships, healing is taking place because God is. Because God is. That's all we ever need to know. And so as I open this circle of prayer, I pause momentarily so that you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer this day. You may speak their names silently or aloud, and you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names are spoken here this day, I know that God is right where they are, right in the midst of everything going on. This prayer goes out to everyone on this planet needing a prayer this day. Everyone needing a prayer this day. God is in the midst of everything. Every situation, every circumstance, every event, God is in the midst of it. This is the truth that I know. I just give great, great thanks in this moment for the word spoken. I give great, great thanks for the perfect manifestation of this word spoken this day. I know indeed that all is well because I know indeed that all is God. And I simply say, thank you, Father, Mother, God. Thank you, Infinite Presence. Thank you, Divine Mother. I just allow it to be now. And so it is.